Hello, Tesha.
Hi, Jen.
I have to say, thank you for bringing bags to Value Village for me today because
Oh,
that is something that I am horrible at. It is horrible, first off, for me to fill the bags. I never get that done, but then they never, ever, ever go anywhere. Like I'm that thing, like, have you seen going around social media, like about, I go all day and fill all the bags and then leave them in my car for 6 months while I drive around with them.
yes.
Mine barely make it to the car.
I am definitely better about it. So I actually had gone to the donation center earlier this week, yesterday, actually.
Yes.
And then I went there today with your stuff, and it was the same kid working.
Uh-huh.
So he's like, "Oh, hey, you cleaning out your closets?" And I was like, "Actually, this is my friend's stuff." And he's like, "So she's cleaning out her closet?" I'm like, "Guest room. Her mother's coming to visit." And he's like, "Well, thank you so much for bringing your friend's stuff here." He's like, "How did you get roped into that?" I'm like, "You don't get it. I'm not going to get into it." We're women and we're moms and we're friends and we help each other out. That's just like, that's how we care about each other.
I recognize her shortcomings as far as this goes. So
Yeah. But he's like, and some 18-year-old kid who's like,
who has no clue.
"Sorry, you're doing this for your friend?"
Well, and then the funny thing is that you're the second person who helped me bring stuff to Value Village this week.
Right. You know what? But I think there's something to be said for like finding your people, but also knowing like who to ask for what.
Yes.
Because your friends are going to have different strengths.
Totally.
And like if you need me to take stuff to VV, like you need someone to do that, I'm your girl. I will do that.
Well, I know after the one time that you came and like helped me like go through closets, like go through Warren's closet, you were like, "John's going to Value Village tomorrow. So I should take these bags, right?" And I was like, "Absolutely."
Yeah. But like maybe don't ask me to cook you a meal because I don't cook.
That's okay.
Yeah. But like I think that's like part of like, yes, people should just offer support, of course.
Yes.
But like sometimes you do need to ask, and like there's like an art, like knowing who to ask for what.
Well, and there's certain things like something like that you wouldn't even like. How would you know that would be something that I could use? Like the other girlfriend happened to mention it when we were leaving our workout that's where she was going, and I was like, "Oh, I have a bag. Can I like toss it in your car?"
So apparently everyone's clearing out their stuff.
I guess.
Besides that, the other thing I did today was like write some notes about the Patreon episode that we're about to record.
Oh,
We're going to
yes.
record that later on tonight, and I'm going to be telling one of my stories, and it's a lot easier to be the listener.
Well, it is. I mean, I'm the listener today, so like we are in very different roles, or you're in a different role.
Yeah.
But I listen to some podcasts that you can tell that they've had to do a lot of research about.
Yes.
Where I'm like, oh, I don't do any research. I actually, frankly, when it comes to a lot of our guests, other than having like the generalized like topic or story, I don't look into them very much because I kind of feel like it benefits to have somebody like be hearing it for the first time.
Right. Yeah.
Since generally you do all of that research and stuff, unless it's somebody that I know who I've asked.
Yeah, exactly. And like we've recorded enough of these episodes, and on several occasions I've kind of alluded to having had childhood trauma or having had a traumatic childhood, and but I never really elaborate. So on Patreon, I'm going to get into that a little bit. And for those of you who don't know what Patreon is, that is a paid subscription where you can choose the level of membership that you'd like. And we have additional content on there.
And we're aiming to put out like one more regular length episode monthly. And then also as we have good behind the scenes kind of content, that will go there as well.
Yeah. Early
releases. We're talking with guests about potentially doing some giveaways specifically for the Patreon. So join us over there. And it's a monthly thing. You could join for 1 month and be done, or you can hang around. I think if you're on there for 3 or 4 months, you get a sticker, you get copies of our books.
Yes. Yeah. So there's
like
some
that.
incentive for sticking around.
Yeah.
And
when we get more people on there, you guys might even get some more input on to what kinds of topics and people we bring on.
Yeah. So check it out
Right
after you
yes.
listen to this episode.
Yes, Krista is she was somebody who I remember you knew and followed, I think. Correct. Like in Instagram.
Yes.
Followed and wanted to talk to. And I did not know much about, but she is a really special woman and has like a really unique, really kind of special is the only word I can think of, energy.
Yeah, for sure.
And it's a harder topic. So if you're not down for something like that, maybe pin it for another time. Download it for us.
Yep.
But listen to it when you're kind of in a better frame of mind for it.
But yeah, it does deal with suicide loss. So that could be certainly difficult for some people.
Absolutely. So take care of yourself. We love to know what you think about the episodes. So, slide into our DMs, leave us reviews and ratings. All of that stuff helps more people find us. Share with people who you think an episode or all of them might benefit. And we hope you enjoy this week's episode. Hi, I'm Jen, and welcome back to Now What?
I'm Tesha. Thank you so much for listening. We are going to be talking to Krista today, who I have to say that I'm so excited to have. She's someone who I've followed on Instagram for quite some time, and I have so much respect for her. And she was pretty high on my list of people that I wanted to send a pitch out to and hope that they accepted. And I was so excited when she did, and she's here. So I want to thank you, Krista, so much for being here.
She's fangirling.
Welcome. I'm fangirling. Yep. And Krista lives in Alberta. She is a mind-body coach, as well as a joyful living educator, which I'd love for you to tell us a little bit more about what that means exactly. And she's also a mother of 3, one of whom she refers to as being forever 23. And that is one of the things that we're going to be talking a little bit about today. And she's going to share her story with us. Is there anything else that I kind of left out that you think we should know about you?
Nope, I'm good. Just happy to have a real conversation with you. Yeah.
I love that you said that, because it's hard to come by real conversations sometimes. And, COVID has put such a disconnect between people as well, where you're not necessarily going out and hanging out in a restaurant and having lengthy conversations with people and, having people hold space for each other. So it is important, and it does feel good when we have these conversations, right?
Yeah, I'm completely uninterested in BS and fake and superficial. It's just not my thing. Kind of socially awkward. I'm not really a person to get to invite to a party unless you can handle deep diving into soul stretching stuff. I'm a really strong introvert, and I really don't go out a whole lot. I work from home, and I'm grateful for the online world. I have met incredible women from all corners of the world online, and not just women, but primarily women. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm used to having wonderful conversations online.
It's kind of a blessing of COVID. It's like an isolation, but a connectivity, I feel like, across the world that's kind of happening at the same time. And I know we really are thankful for the podcast, for the connection it's given us outside of the news cycle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't watch news. My husband does. So there's never a chance that I'm going to not know of something that I should know.
Right.
I don't watch the news. Otherwise, I end up on the couch pulling the covers over my head. So I've had to really learn, as a highly sensitive, anxious human, how to really protect myself so that I can keep engaging in the world in meaningful ways.
Absolutely. I actually, like, just even from this, I have so many questions for you, but I feel like we should maybe clue our listeners in to a little bit of your story. And then because they will make more sense in the context of our conversation.
Okay. What would you like me to share about?
As we all do, our lives are so multifaceted, and we have all of these components that kind of lead up to where we are now, right? And I know that on your website, which is alifeinprogress.com, correct?
.ca.
.ca, alifeinprogress.ca, we'll fix that. You have like a lengthy bio in there, and I was like, wow, like you've had so many life experiences. One of the things, we kind of wanted to talk about was sort of the last few years, if that's okay, if you feel like you want to build up to that from like even meeting your husband or whatever.
Sure.
We'll leave that to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wherever you want to start.
Wherever you're sort of comfortable starting. How's that?
Sure. All right. I will start with meeting my husband and life partner. So I met him when I was 23 in the laundry room of a university in Quebec. I had traveled on the Greyhound, which I don't think it exists anymore, but it took me like half days to get from Canada to Quebec. And they lost my luggage. So I just had to change of clothes in my backpack. And so I pretty much had to go straight down to the laundry room. And the only other person there was this guy, and he became my husband. And within 2 weeks after meeting him, at first I thought he was kind of like this flirty womanizer type, and I was kind of not interested. And within 2 weeks, I was like, oh, he's my husband. So we have been together 28 years. We just celebrated our 27th anniversary in August, and I'm so grateful for him, but we never could have imagined what life was going to be like. You know, all the hard stuff, lots of beauty, but hard stuff that we would have ran from if we could have.
Yes.
But I'm grateful that we have managed to move towards each other in trauma. So almost 2 years ago, our son, he was 23 at the time. His name is Jairus, and I adore him. And I love him. And it feels important to me I have to keep practicing my language around this. And I'm sure Jen knows because you've lost your husband. But I have to practice. When you lose a child, you have to practice and try on language for size because it's really, really hard. So I just practice. So right now, it feels important to me to say, I didn't just love him in the past. I love him today.
Still love him.
Yeah.
So Jairus, he was a highly sensitive soul, like his mom, struggled with really intense anxiety. He had severe depression. It was treatment resistant. So in the end, he tried everything that was available. So beyond medication, at first he tried through lifestyle and nutrition, and he had really good friends. He was a talented, creative person. He had his own small business called O'Davi Design. And so I have a scholarship. I created a scholarship in his name, and it's called the O'Davi Design Scholarship. He had, I think I said, wonderful friends. We loved him. His sisters loved him. He loved his sisters. But he suffered. He struggled hard. So 3 years ago, I guess it was lots of years of, sleeping with our cell phone on beside our bed every night because we just didn't know. We needed it on. Anyway, in 2019, Jairus wrote, or in 2018, actually, he told me he was going to die. And we fought about it and cried about it. And he wouldn't tell me how he was going to die, but he had a plan, and really there was nothing I could do about it. And I tried.
I can imagine what that's like to hear as a parent.
He and I were really close, and I think I knew him better than anybody else on this planet, and that was a privilege. I was also the person that he poured out his pain and rage on. He shared his hope and longing and fear and rage and all of it with me, and I just sat here in the living room and I tried to hold it for him. So he told me what he expected after he died, and anyway, it's a messy story, and but we fought for him. We fought with everything that we had, And 3 days after his final treatment, he ended his life. I had watched hope drain from him, dealing with our medical system and a really, I think, a bullying and dysfunctional law enforcement. So specifically the RCMP in Canada, because we dealt with Edmonton police who were really wonderful, compassionate, helpful, but they have training in mental health and the RCMP do not.
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's something that I don't have it in me right now to
Fight for.
To advocate for that. I'm putting energy elsewhere, but it's a really important, it's a huge problem in Canada.
I think it's a huge problem in general that police are called to situations where it should be counselors and therapists and,
Yeah, it adds layers of trauma to something that is already devastating.
Mm-hmm.
So we fought for Jairus and I'm going to wind this up. So he wrote out his will. He tried to die the first time. He didn't succeed. So I went and cleaned up the rope that he had used and helped him clean out his apartment and moved him home. And just a lot of really, really hard things happened.
Mm-hmm. And really trying.
Yeah. And he was trying to, and I feel like it's important to tell people that, and obviously we can't speak for every person who dies by suicide, but Jairus wanted to live. He didn't want to die, but he didn't know how anymore to live. He didn't see any hope and his suffering was so intense. And there's a lot of lip service paid to the idea of mental health talk about it and ask for help. But I was screaming for help.
And where was it?
It's really easy to put on little, whatever those are called, like on Facebook, where you put your little bell talk day, thing around
yeah.
you. And it pisses me off. I'm like, I don't think we're telling the truth.
How is this actually helping?
Yeah, people are falling through the cracks all the time. And it's really horrific what we're dealing with when you love a young person who's asking for help and the way that they're treated. And I know that for myself, I really try to be careful what I say because I don't want other people to lose hope. And it's a dilemma, truth telling is important to advocate for change. And also, I don't want to be a voice that destroys hope for another young person who
was hoping that the system is going to help them.
Yeah. And sometimes it does. So, yeah. So Jairus died October 23rd, 2019. So we're just coming up on the 2-year anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard. And hard isn't really good, a good descriptor.
I don't think there's any descriptor.
You just don't have a better word.
Yeah, I mean, unless somebody has dealt with a traumatic loss and is going through that year too. I don't know. I don't think there are words to explain to someone.
No. And there were moments I wasn't sure I could survive it for sure.
I sympathize with that.
Yeah. I have a really good support system of friends and honestly a supportive community for the most part. And my husband and I, that's where I guess I was trying to say earlier, I'm so grateful that we moved towards each other in the face of this because statistically marriages it's pretty hard.
A loss of a child like that. And
then to suicide. But the way that my girls pulled together to love their brother to the very end and the way that they've pulled together to love each other, I'm just so proud of them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it speaks to you and your husband as well and what you have modeled for them and shown them and the love that you've given them. I think there's an inherent empathy in us, but it needs to be fostered. And
yeah, it's complicated and hard sometimes because actually, I don't even know if you guys have children or the ages.
We have young children.
Our kids are both 6 and 9. They're the same age.
I don't know. Yeah, it's complicated because online, honestly, it's tricky. There's stuff that can feel shaming. on the one hand, okay, I'll give you an example. I have some girlfriends whose oldest are just leaving to university right now, and they're experiencing that grief and transition. And I believe that the fact that their children are ready to fly on their own is a wonderful sign that they are well attached and they feel safe, right?
Mm-hmm.
But on the other hand, it's like, okay, but what about the kids who are struggling? Does that mean you didn't do a good job as a parent? What if they need more support? What if they have challenges that don't make it easy for them to fly? Like, is that on you? Because it seems like it is, like if we believe better. So it's really humbling. First of all, I think parenting is hard on the ego in general.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. We can all agree to that.
Yeah. And I mean, my kids are my favorite people. They are cool and wise and creative, and I like them. I like them a lot as humans.
Yes.
And also they're hard on the ego. But this type of experience and loss is so humbling and hard. It's rough, it is rough.
It's like multiplying, and obviously my experience is different, but I just think from the traumatic aspect of it, it's like multiplying how hard parenting is by infinity.
Yeah.
To reference something that my children talk about all the time.
It's
this by infinity. It just it takes it, you enter into a whole other class, I think, of something that's already really goddamn hard, that nobody knows what they're doing, and there's no playbook.
Yes. So as you can imagine, losing a child there's always, I think, going to be guilt, and there's going to be shame, and there's going to be all sorts of really challenging emotions to process and work through.
Mm-hmm.
And I hear this, I'm part of a grief circle of women who have lost children to, chronic illness, suicide, different means, but we've all lost children. I'm really grateful. It's raw and it's hard. And I am like, I don't know if I could have survived it without the example of these other women who mostly are ahead of me on the journey. Now there's at least one who has joined since. But just hearing like the story and knowing you're not alone and knowing you're not doing it wrong, it really is this horrible and hard. It just helps you hold on.
Yeah, because I think you can almost, if you're in it alone and you're not communicating with other people who've been in a similar situation, or you don't know anybody who has, or it feels so alone. But then I think there's part of you that wonders if like your suffering is, I don't know, like, do we do this thing where we're like, is this the right amount of suffering? Am I like suffering too much? Am I supposed to be moving on now? Like, because I think people think you're supposed to move on.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we've talked about this. It comes up a lot with Jen and I, but like, oh, it's been a year, so like move on. Everything's good now, right? I'm like,
yeah.
Even like with myself, when I was told I didn't have cancer anymore, like everyone thinks like you're better. And I'm like, no, I was a mental wreck, right? Just trying to process everything that had just happened. But people think you're just supposed to move on. And then we wonder, like, am I being dramatic? Should I be just like over this now? Like, I don't know. It's helpful, I think, when you know that other people are also having a hard time and like, this is normal.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Grieving is normal and grieving is hard.
Yeah. The common humanity part of self-compassion.
Yes.
Yeah. And you know what I find also, for me, it's not only the recognition that I'm not doing it wrong. It's really this hard. It's also somehow that we're all also practicing allowing joy. We're all practicing allowing delight or happiness or excitement, because that is critical.
And it can be really hard to do when you're dealing with a loss of this magnitude.
Yeah. So yeah, just having that companionship, even across, the grief circle that I meet with, they're in Colorado. I'm the only Canadian, but COVID allowed me to join.
That's great. I love that.
Yeah.
I have so much gratitude because I don't know if I could do this alone.
Mm-hmm.
going back to the idea of practicing living with joy and embracing joy. And before we were recording, we were talking about how hard year 2 is. That was really hard for me personally in year 2, especially. And I think I don't have anything to say just other than that is like, I really understand how impossible and what that is as a practice, because it's not a given.
I appreciate that you said that, like, as a practice. Yeah. Shortly after I left my son, working online is interesting when you experience something like this, because I choose to grieve out loud and to share part of the journey. Certainly not the fullness of it, but part of it with other people on purpose, because I think we need to tell the truth about real life. But sometimes the women would say things like, just on Facebook, where I got a lot of email and private, messages, and they would, sometimes people would say, I would just die. I couldn't survive that. I would just die. And I was like, okay, honestly, I was like, what the fuck? Like, I'm a mother who just lost her child. I just cremated my son's body. And
you're telling me I should die?
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, that's nice. Like, thank you. And like, honest to goodness, some of the messages I received, I do not want to share them here. There's a lot of stuff I haven't even talked about, because words don't help. Words just don't help. And if I can find words, if I can string together some words, I would like them to be mostly hopeful, or like gentle guidance of some sort, to help people to know better, like how to support somebody they love. But that example, around the year 2 mark, I think about that and I think, you know what? They're right. It is that impossible. It is impossible. It's impossible for me every day. And it's impossible for the women that I meet with in a grief circle every day. And the conclusion I've come to so far on the journey is simply that we grow into the strength that we need. We grow into it. We don't have what I need. I don't have what I need for tomorrow. But I can choose this breath, this hour, this day, and slowly it expands. And I can start thinking about weeks or even seasons without falling apart. And this has really, I practiced mindfulness for years, but this has been a teacher like no other. This is like graduate school, so there's like theoretical knowledge, and then there's like embodied lived experience.
Mm-hmm.
And the two are not the same. The two can both be useful together, but like they are not the same. And in a really deep, I guess I like the word embodied because that's how I feel it, is like deeply rooted, like in my bones and my flesh, is like this understanding that all I need is the strength for this conversation. I get to just be here with you, fully present, and I don't need yet to think about the next thing. And so anyways, that's how I imagine it. And so I feel like those women who express that, who, while not a super graceful or compassionate response, I think, but they are right. They didn't have a good filter, but they are right. It is impossible. And you think you're going to die.
Like it kind of feels that painful.
It is that painful. It is that horrible. It is that painful. And I think, so if there's anybody listening, it's like, gather in your support system. There were times I just sent a text to a sister or a friend and they said, I am not okay, or I am drinking too much, or I would like to take a little pill and disappear. And I was just reaching out to say, like, grab hold of me, because, through texting, I just needed to be accountable and say, like, I'm not okay. And that was enough. Like, they would probably just email me back one thing, but yeah, it's hard. And I really, really, really encourage anybody walking through this journey to gather in their support system. You need people. Even if you're like me and you are a strong introvert and you don't want to be touched and you don't want people showing up at your door unannounced, you don't want people hugging you without consent. Like, those things are messy, but persist. You need people.
Mm-hmm.
This road is not one that you want to navigate alone.
This is a theme that comes up again and again in these wonderful conversations we have with people, is just the idea of community and the importance of community, and finding that in whatever way that might be for you.
Mm-hmm.
But so many people, when we ask them things about, what advice might you give, or what did you find helpful, this idea of people comes up again and again.
And for the people who know someone who has gone through something hard and traumatic, don't give up on them.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Do something. Like, it came up in a conversation we had last night. Just do something.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they hate when you knock on their door, maybe knock on their door because you're worried about them.
Yeah, I mean, for me, that wouldn't fly.
Probably not, but
but there were so many
slip a note under the door.
Yeah. People who dropped muffins off at the door.
Yeah.
For me, it was powerful that within hours, some of my brothers showed up. And then 2 of my sisters took turns staying with us for a week at a time, making sure we were fed. I couldn't eat. I couldn't feed my daughters. If you lose an adult child, they have bank accounts and all these social media accounts, and they have apartments, and they have the work to do while you're dealing with coroner and RCMP and also all these things. I mean, it's just stuff that I look back, I don't know how we did it. I'm not even ready, honestly, to really look back, like to look back too closely. But I know that we needed community care. In the last couple of years, there was this article going around. I don't know if you saw it, but it was focused on community care and how often we, talk about self-care. And I mean, I'm a big believer in loving ourselves well and tending to ourselves in all sorts of ways. And also, we need community care through social support systems and compassionate medical care and neighbors, and just all the things my son died by suicide, so insurance won't pay for a funeral. And we had been in a car accident, a very traumatic car accident, just 3 weeks before Jairus died. So we lost our vehicle. I couldn't work. I was injured. I'm still injured from it. And so we had to buy a car because he needed us. So we went into debt to buy a vehicle to get back on the highway to attend to Jairus. And anyways, so it's right in the middle of crises where money is tightest, and that's where you're losing money or you can't work or whatever. So, our community gathered and they paid for all, our memorial service for him. Like that, it's practical and it's so needed, right? Because it alleviates some of the stress.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, reaching out to each other in practical ways, like whether it's like take somebody's recycling to the depot or mow their lawn, or asking is good. Get permission. I had no idea we were going to go down this rabbit trail, but I do think it's an important part of the conversation. And at least for me, it's helpful when people do just take action, but like in practical ways, not like, can I hug you? I think the difference is people dealing with grief is very uncomfortable, and we're not very good at it in North America, at least the kind of white European type cultures, right? The indigenous cultures that have their own traditions and around it and ceremony, and at least, some, like I'm not an expert, there's a lot of discomfort. It's really hard to be with somebody in this pain that you can't fix.
Because we want to fix it.
And I think trying to fix it is about you. It's selfish. It may not be intentionally selfish, but it is. It's about alleviating your pain and making you feel like you're doing something good. But actually, it can cause harm, and it can push people away and shove them underground. And I think it's an aspect of emotional intelligence, really, to learn how to be in discomfort and not run, to just be with it and be with each other in the worst, and to recognize that there is no fixing it. So you don't have to find words. You don't have to know solutions. You can't fix it. You can't make it okay.
There aren't words, there aren't solutions.
Oh, exactly. So yeah, you can drive kids to school and you can make meals and you can help just the survival process. That really is helpful, but don't try to fix, just be with. That's what I think is a hard thing. I have compassion because I'm pretty sure that I'm positive that I've said horrible, simplistic things to people when they were hurting in the past. Like, I'm just positive because I'm human.
And we don't know better. We're not taught better. It's not modeled for us growing up. We don't know what to say. Yeah. And so we do the insincere, let me know if you need anything. And maybe it is sincere, but I'm sorry for your loss. And or sometimes people really well-intentioned, I'm sure, Jen, you probably experienced this, like the intention is there, but it just comes out so wrong.
Yes.
Because we don't know what to say. We're uncomfortable with someone else's pain. So then, maybe that makes us say something wrong or not say anything at all.
Yeah.
Because we just don't know.
And we're going to make we just are. And I think we're all in progress. We don't know what we don't know. Like you said, we're all learning. And everybody's different. So you might have one person need this and then you get it wrong with another person. So I think that's okay to just know we're going to get it wrong. And I think it's still good to try. But for me, the biggest distinction or invitation I would offer to somebody else is you try to tell the truth. Am I doing this for me or am I doing this for them?
Yes.
And because I had people, for instance, come up to me and one of my daughters in the grocery store parking lot where I'm just it was so fresh. And she tried to hug me and I said, no. And she got angry with me and she started arguing with me. You mean you don't even want me to hug? And I'm like, no, I don't. I was like, lady,
I wasn't a hugger before.
Yeah. I'm like, back away now. And do not touch me ever without my consent, ever. And especially when I just lost a child, give me some space. And again, this is me, but it's not really about the exact situation. It's about that this was clearly about her needs. It wasn't about me at all. And even when I expressed what I needed, then she got angry. And by the way,
talk to
me or look at me today. So clearly this was about their need to feel useful or something. And I don't have any animosity towards them because this is messy business. It's messy business.
I will say Jen is a hugger, so it's a little bit different, but I remember
I wouldn't have liked
when Warren passed away, I just wanted to hug her. I couldn't wait to see her, to hug her.
Yeah.
So I can empathize with why somebody wanted to hug you. But of course, it depends on the relationship. It depends on what the other person wants. If you don't want a hug, then you should be able to say no, thank you.
Yeah.
Right? And them not take that so personally.
Yeah. My inner circle, they're allowed to hug me. My sister's brothers, they can hug me. But it's a boundary. And, honestly, it's just also not that good at respecting people's boundaries.
No. And if you don't want to hug, that's up to you. You can just say, not right now.
Just recognizing that really this is this is not a one size fits all thing. This is we're just talking free range here.
Yeah.
But I do think like consent and honoring what the other person needs, and just noticing when you feel offense or you feel hurt or whatever, and just remind yourself, it isn't about you right now. It isn't about you. They're just trying to survive. They're trying to actually remember how to breathe again, right?
And it's really for, like, it's okay for you to communicate what you do or do not need in that time.
And it's not about the person you're like enforcing that boundary to for, like, or saying what you need to. It's about what you, the grieving person, needs in that moment. And if you care enough that you want to hug someone, then you should care enough to listen when they're telling you,
I don't want to hug.
Well, what they need, whatever it should be.
Yeah.
Another layer, and I guess this is interesting, is like, we're also not a very trauma aware, trauma informed society.
Because they were trauma illiterate all the time.
And so that's another layer that I know people don't understand, but you don't have to understand something to respect somebody's boundaries. And and when, like, I teach my children about consent. So I'm like, when grown adults can't handle the idea of somebody saying no to them, I think that's the problem. But the thing is too, is like, we had been through significant trauma, and some of the boundary violations that I experienced actually were the first times I had panic attacks after this all. And I ended up living with 17 months of PTSD and severe panic disorder, up to 8 and 10 hours a day. So people don't know and I'm not saying, like, I don't know if it would have happened regardless. It's very possible that it would have happened even if nobody ever sent me inappropriate messages. But my very first panic attack was one of these examples of a boundary violation. Of course, it wasn't willful, but it was, again, another example where it was very clear that they were trying to meet their own needs. They were trying to somehow alleviate their own pain and cause harm. And so that's another reason why I've chosen also to speak openly online about, my journey in general, at least kind of the macro, is because there, if I'm experiencing this, that means there's a whole lot of people out there also experiencing it. And it's hard. It is so hard to navigate. I think that we need to, if we talk more openly about it, we destigmatize, we remove shame. We remember that we're just human in a messy world. There's so much stuff that we can't control. And we can be, like in my case, I have beautiful friends and a loving family and enough money and work I love, and all my basic needs are met, and also significant trauma and PTSD and severe panic disorder. And how I mentioned before that there can be like messages that feel shaming online when we oversimplify. We take a really messy, like, let's say mental health, and we say, just use this essential oil, or just get out and exercise more, because there's research that says, a 20-minute walk a day is as good as, an antidepressant or whatever. And it's like, and I love a good evidence base. And also let's remember that we're not just one thing. This is multifactorial. We are complex beings. There's all these different contributing factors. There's racism. There's lack of access to medical care in some cases. There's food insecurity. There's, countless issues, spiritual crises, all sorts of different things. And I love conversations where we don't have to try to problem solve, because like there's no real answer. But I love being able to just kind of hash things out and be real about it, which is what you're doing. And that's why I said yes to this conversation. So.
Well, that's great. We love that. I wanted to circle back to my questions that I wrote down, because you said at the beginning that you have no capacity for bullshit or superficiality. And is this because I am like that? And it was exacerbated after my loss. And I'm just curious personally, like, has that always been you, or has it come about more since Jairus?
Definitely after he died, I lost all ability. Like, it was like I was already somebody who didn't like it and just chose to opt out of places or relationships where it was about that for the most part. But I had still held on in some ways out of guilt, out of sense of loyalty. I had kind of stayed in certain relationships and allegiances or whatever, where I knew I shouldn't have stayed, but I did it anyway. And yeah, after Jairus died, it was like there was nothing left in me for that. And I did end certain relationships, and I did it in integrity, and I knew it was the right thing, and I have never regretted it. But it did take, it was like that loss. It was just like, there's nothing left in me to, I don't know how to explain it. I'm just assuming, kind of, but it's just like,
I think that like, I barely have the energy to get up and feed myself and
It
take a
takes a
shower.
lot of energy to be fake. It takes a lot of energy to like put on that face and to be, superficial, or to nod and smile along with something someone is saying. It actually takes a lot of energy.
Yeah.
And I think when you're in that place, like, you don't have energy for that. That's not like you're experiencing trauma. Your energy is there, not, let me go put on my happy face and nod and smile, or right. Like,
I was never really one who, I am a pretty honest person. And, and some of it in my case is that when you're in crises, well, I'll speak for myself because I can't actually speak for other people. So when we were in crises, there were certain things I just didn't want anything else I was just like, we're just holding on. Everything is going towards keeping my son alive, affirming him, loving him, showing up for him. And I didn't want to rock the boat. So it felt safer to just stay and tolerate or whatever. And then all of a sudden he's gone. And I'm like, why would I now? Everything was about like keeping him alive, and now he's gone. Like,
so all of those things that I was just like dealing with because it wasn't rocking the boat any further. I don't need that. I need to do that anymore.
No. And I will say, I've heard from other people who have gone through child loss that this is pretty common, that a lot of times you lose relationships, and sometimes some of your closest relationships. And, I think it's sad, but I think what's even more sad is betraying ourselves to stay in a relationship where we don't feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And I really think that as women, and I grew up in a Christian environment and in an evangelical church. And so I can't speak to everybody's experience, but for me, I really believed that to be good meant almost this extra, like pouring yourself out until you're empty, or like, and it's tricky because like I was pretty boundaried. And also I think the problem was that I had equated that compassion means, I don't know, you give 80 million chances, and it's like, and I just don't believe that. Like but I stayed there for too long, and I have compassion for that. I understand why I did that, but I don't remember the quote word for at all. But there is this Glennon Doyle quote, and I can't, I'm not going to be really any help because I do not remember her actual words. But all I remember is that it was something about, I will never stay in a room or a relationship where I betray myself or something for belonging, something like that.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I really found that very powerful. And of course, Brene Brown does a lot of work around this idea, and I've certainly benefited from her work. But again, this would be an example for me of theory versus lived experience, in a way where the death of my son, just everything, it's almost like a lot of this learning was sort of up here in me. Like, I had done a lot of work over the years to kind of, well, maybe I'll say, like, I feel like sometimes we move it from head into heart. And then he died, and it was like, boom, dropped into my body. And now it was like, I was living it. I was living dissociating. I was living violent shaking as my body tried to discharge energy. I was living things I read about and studied to serve my clients, but now it was living in my body, but also living in my body. I think a real deep strength and deeply rooted self-compassion. And even, because I feel like this is probably important for us to somehow meander over to the idea of joy, but even joy. And I would love, if you're willing, that, to kind of chat a little bit about that, about the idea of allowing joy to live alongside grief and suffering.
Love to talk about this.
Yeah, I think that is
not just going to allow it.
I think that's a really important idea. I did talk about in the beginning when I introduced you that you were a joyful living educator. And we would definitely love to hear more about that and what that means. And
yeah, I say, like, I'm a joyful living educator who writes a whole lot about pain and anxiety and hard life things. And there's a couple of reasons why, but one, because it's the reality of my life. I have lived in chronic pain. I have buried a lot of people that I love. I have suffered with suicidal ideation. I tried to die 3 times when I was young. I have lived with intense anxiety. I have hated myself. I've wished myself away. And also, I have learned to love and like who I am. And I have learned the gift of paradox, or both and, so that I can allow joy and delight to live alongside fear and pain in my life. I have learned to show up through fear, to offer my small gifts to the world, even though I'm always afraid. And so I offer that which I need, which I think a lot of people do, in service-oriented work, but also because I really believe that one of the great disservices in almost this like romantic comedy, fairy tale-esque, it's almost like a mythology in our culture that we buy into, or somehow are, I'm not sure if the word is inculcated, I'm not sure, but it's like we absorb it or something from a really young age, is that mythology or that idea that life should be happy all the time, like you said. And when I get married and when I have a house and when I have a decent car and, when this and that, then I'm going to be happy.
And there's always a next, by the way.
There's always a next. Where in this story do we fit in the inevitable death? Like, does everybody stay alive forever? Or, do you lose your pet, and do you lose your mom, and you get a diagnosis in your body, your health? And it's like we pretend, and it's so harmful, because then every time one of us bumps up against the reality of life, and it doesn't have to be big trauma, it can be your fridge broke and money's tight. It can be you have some conflict with one of your best friends. It can be, I don't know, you broke your ankle and you're really disappointed. And yet that is real life. And instead of allowing and making room for, we fight it, we resist it, we avoid it, we get angry at it, we judge ourselves. I work with women in the middle season of life. The age range is fairly broad, but nonetheless, they're somewhere in the middle season of life. And it's like across the board. Like, I'm not sure that I ever work with any person who doesn't have to do this kind of wrestling and questioning and grappling to kind of come face to face with like this fairy tale ideal about like what life should be. And I should have it all together, and I should never suffer, and I should never feel overwhelmed, and I should never have self-doubt, and I shouldn't, I should always know the exact right thing to how to parent my child. And we bump up against this reality, and then we judge ourselves and we think we're doing it wrong. So it sounds so easy, right? Like it sounds like, yeah, of course that's true. And yet we don't live it. We don't live it.
I agree.
And so anyway, so then we shun what we call negative emotions. And so I don't believe in negative emotions. I believe in uncomfortable emotions. And this isn't new. Like I've heard, I'm gleaning from the wisdom of all these people who've come before me. I believe that all emotions are messengers. I believe that there's wisdom there. And I believe that one of the greatest signs of maturity and freedom is learning how to pause. So Viktor Frankl has this beautiful quote that I love. He talks about, I'll massacre this too, but like something like between impulse and response, there is a space. And in that space lies your power to choose, or something like that. And that speaks to me on a deep, deep level.
Mm-hmm.
In that space, I get to examine the story that I'm believing in the moment. I get to feel whatever's coming up. I don't have to react. I don't have to respond according to instinct or my old patterning, because I have agency and I have freedom to choose my path forward as long as I allow a breath, a little space. And I believe that when we allow all of the feelings, I believe that's where we experience joy. And again, it's not new idea. There's nothing new here. I've heard people probably since I was really young say like, if you shut down whatever emotion, you also shut down joy, like something like that. But I live this, and I believe it to be true that when we believe that we should be happy all the time, what we really do is we shut it all down, because we need to protect ourselves. We have to armor up. We develop self-protective mechanisms and habits, and to get our needs met and to feel safe and loved. And it really does require a little bit of loosening of the armor and a little bit of opening up, just even a little bit, just dipping your toe over into these emotions that feel really big and hard, and learning that you can trust yourself. You're strong enough to stay here, and you will not die here. It feels like you will, but you won't. You can do this. And then you tip back over here into safety, and then you come over here, and you just grow in self-trust, and you enlarge your capacity to be with discomfort. And I really believe that that's where joy grows, like real joy, not fleeting happiness. I believe that's where we bear fruit, right in the middle of the storm.
Yeah, that was really powerful. But I mean, it makes sense what you're saying, that when we just try to not allow, like think we have to be happy all the time, and we try to shut down those so-called negative feelings that we think they're out there, because we put these labels on emotions instead of just saying they're emotions, that you can become protectionist, and you can therefore shut down all of the emotions, including the good ones, because you're trying to not feel the range of emotions that we have.
Yeah, and the problem isn't the emotion. The problem is the vulnerability,
right?
Or the problem is the risk. And that's the problem. And so it's so scary. And I really think we need to bring compassion to it. Like this isn't about judging ourselves. It's like, of course we're afraid. Of course. It's not like this is modeled to us well. I didn't grow up in a home. I grew up in a loving home, but not a home where emotional vulnerability was modeled at all.
Oh, don't feel those big emotions. Those nobody wants to hear that.
No.
And even though that was never really said to me explicitly, it wasn't modeled. And then I didn't feel safe, so I was hurting, and I was,
you're right. Like if it's not modeled for you, then how do you know to do it? And I think there's other subtle ways growing up that we can have our feelings shut down. I'm not trying to like throw my mother under the bus or whatever, but I distinctly remember being told I was being dramatic a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was being dramatic was often when I was expressing a strong emotion, whatever that emotion may be. Like, don't you think you're being a little dramatic? And it was said in a negative way that's like, was shutting it down. Right. And I don't think that I'm the only kid that ever had that said to them. Like, I just don't.
Yeah.
I think it's probably pretty pervasive. That
and for highly sensitive people, like, I don't know if you are, but my dad said that to me, maybe only twice, but it was like, I never, ever, I'm 50 years old and I've never forgotten that he said that to me, because just like you said, I was actually trying to ask for help and tell him that I wasn't okay. And he said, shut me down. And again, I really huge respect for my mom and dad. So this isn't about, like you said, throwing anybody under the bus, because believe me, like, I know that, like, I just expect that my kids will want therapy and I am willing to pay for it. I just like, there is not a chance on this earth that any of our kids are going to grow up without any kind of wounding. Of course they are. We can do the best we can. And, you know, so that's okay.
That's life.
So I'd love to spin off of that, because something I'd love to talk about is this idea of feeling safe and at home in our bodies and our lives. And, you know, you just said you feel safe when you feel heard. And so one of the ways that I would then kind of bring that into, you know, deepen the conversation, say with women in my membership or something, would be like, let's talk about friendship. Let's talk about you befriending yourself, right? So you feel safe when you feel heard. Are you listening to yourself? Are you giving a voice to your grief? Are you allowing those things you're experiencing to be heard? Or are you shoving them down, judging them as bad, running from them, numbing out, whatever, right? And no judgment around that either, because we all have coping mechanisms to get through this world sometimes. But I think it's a valid question. Is like, if that's what would feel good to you and you would feel loved if your best friend listens, right? Are you doing it? And of course, I'm not just like specifically asking you, Jen. I'm asking.
I'll answer. I think I'm the bomb. I'm my best friend.
Oh, yeah. Tell me more.
But yeah, I mean, that idea that if that's what you are seeking in others, are you being that for yourself?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And honestly, I think the answer is often no.
I totally think so too.
Or at times, at least, it's a no.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
for everyone,
it's been a no for me. I think, you know, when you're in a home alone with two small boys, you need to be your own best friend.
Mm-hmm.
For, you know, however many months we were locked down here.
But you're spending a lot of time with yourself, so you better like her.
No, but I don't think I know a woman alive who hasn't said no to that question, and maybe for most of their life,
if they're being honest.
Yeah, and so that's what I hear in my work. And in my work, people are pretty darn honest, because you won't last long in my circles if you aren't open to that possibility. But you can be a lurker and you can be quieter and stuff for a while. But yeah, so are we listening to ourselves? Are we offering ourselves what we need? Are we telling the truth to ourselves? Are we befriending ourselves really and truly? And the answer is always going to be, you know, even as we do lots and lots of work, it's still going to be, well, yes, mostly, or yes, some of the time, or yes, imperfectly. I'm personally very committed to living that way. And I have blind spots, and my girlfriend sometimes reminds me, and I, like, we all need, and again, back to, we need each other, right? Because we lift each other up. And I love that. Just like my husband and I, you know, through this grief journey, it's like, there's days where I'm the one lifting, and there's days that he's the one lifting. And it's, that's what relationship really is about. So
it's that push and pull, and having that person to lift you up when you can't lift yourself up.
yeah.
This work that you do, were you doing this before Jairus died, or is this come about in your own personal journey?
I started my business 6 years ago.
Okay.
And so, yeah, I had already started.
You were already doing this work.
Yeah.
So then that leads me to, how did you do this work while you were going through those last few years in crisis with him?
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah.
And then after too. Like I can't fathom.
No, I don't know.
But you still did, but you did it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. I was thinking a few months ago, sometimes it helps me when I'm feeling really overwhelmed to write out a list of everything that I have been going through or I've gone through, because then it helps me witness my strength. Because it's really easy for me to forget that, holy crap, you're doing something that is so beyond hard. And, I'm really proud of myself, but there are moments where I lose sight of the magnitude because I just think I should be able to do this, right? I have to be able to do this. And so I wrote out this list and I shocked myself. Got to be honest. I was like, oh my gosh, like, how did you do that? I don't know. So half of those years, 3 of the years of my business were in fact, crises and loss. So the year that Jairus was really, essentially, we were trying to keep him alive. I think, it's like you do what you have to do, because I needed the money. So I only work part-time anyway, but just on a really basic level, we needed the income. When you have a child who's in trouble, you need to be able to support them. So it was an act of love, but I think too, it, like, when you're in crises, right, you just you do the next right thing and you do the next right thing, and you don't question it too much, because, I would pour out my, I don't want to be overly dramatic, but I feel like I would open my vein for my baby. Like I would. So, so that's what you do. You're in survival mode, and I'm pretty darn efficient. I am capable. I am a capable person, and I am used to working hard in life, like emotionally hard. And to be honest, I have found living hard for most of my life. So walking through, like I said, like mental health struggles and everything. So I'm used to that. And I've really built a lot of resilience and strength over the past decade. And that I do not think I would be standing here if I hadn't done all of that hard soul stretching work. After Jairus died, though, I really cut almost everything, to be honest. And a couple work colleagues, so to speak, like they work online in the simple living niche, they took over my Facebook page for my business and they ran it. I don't even remember how long. Talk about practical, like that was huge. I wouldn't have been able to do it. Like I would have, but they did that for me, an incredible gift. And I had started my membership. It was 3 or 4 weeks before our car accident, and another 3 weeks after that, Jairus died. So essentially, like 6 weeks after I started this brand new membership, we were just in chaos. And interestingly, so I'm a very intuitive person, like a very gut-led person. And I kind of like hear things like deep inside. And I just knew that even though I was afraid, like it was time to start this community. And I had already been thinking about it a few years before. I think even 2 years or 3 years before, I actually had started it, taken people's money, and then panicked and gave their money back. Because I was for real. Because fear is a common thing in my life, and freedom is really important to me. And when I get afraid, like when I feel like my freedom is going to be restricted. So even I'm under contract to write a book, and I panicked. Like I get this book contract and I'm like, nope, don't want it. Cause I feel like trapped almost. So I sometimes have to pause, work through what's going on. Like, how can I say yes to this? Or what can I do to make me, my body feel safe? So anyways, so I held on to the membership. I think about it and I'm like, it doesn't make sense on a logical level, but that part of my work, I gave up. I believe that I gave up everything else. Like as soon as he died, I was like, I couldn't, like I quit everything except my membership. And that group of women, as I was showing up to teach and love and serve them in the midst of crises, but nonetheless, I was doing that and I was doing it well. It was a lifeline for me.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I'm a truth teller. And so I will always walk my talk. And so I will never lie. I will never say, oh yeah, I'm doing this thing and I'm not really doing the thing. So if I'm going to be teaching something, I'm going to be walking my talk. So it really served as this powerful lifeline. And the members were so compassionate. I was having panic attacks. I was still doing interviews and having panic attacks in the middle of them and just keep going. And I was, and sometimes it was so severe that I couldn't show up, but it was just a beautiful example, I think, of brave community. And it's called the Brave and Beautiful Community.
Well,
And
there
I'm
you
like,
go.
my goodness. Yeah. So I just sort of crawled, and then, and then I could kind of limp a little bit with a cane, and I'm slowly just sort of trying to come back, but I'm still really limited in my emotional and energetic capacity.
I
mhm.
feel that. I feel that too. I do.
Yeah. And do you resent it sometimes? Like, I'm like, I just wish somehow, like, I know we can't rush grief and there's wisdom in grief and we have to allow it. And also I'm like, I just sort of want to be able to jump ahead and write a darn book. But I don't have it in me right now. I don't actually, I'm going to have to push my time frame even for that, because you don't know this journey until you're in it. And it's a lot harder and a lot longer than I ever could have imagined.
Well, and it's not prescribed and you don't know what each day or each moment is going to bring. And, you're doing it while also parenting grieving children. And that is the thing. I mean, your girls, I imagine, are older than my children. So they presumably have a much better understanding, at least, of death. But it's constantly the grief is constantly coming up with them. And it's triggering in a way for me that can send me on a wave. And it's this whole ebb and flow that I think it's learning to live with it and building your life so that you can ride those waves and maximize the time when you can. I don't know. That's where I'm at anyway. I'm not sure,
Yeah. Grief is unruly. We don't control trauma. We don't control grief. And you're right. And I'm very grateful that I have work that I've built it that very intentionally this way so that I do have flexibility. And part of that was because I have a child who, was struggling, and I want to remain responsive to my family's needs.
Your community that you have, your job, could you just tell us a little bit about what that means to be a member? Like what type of services you provide there?
Sure. So the membership is one thread of my work. And so it is a group of maximum, I cap it at 60 women. And they currently range from 30 to 69 years old, but they can self-select. I just say somewhere in the middle season of life, but most are kind of more that 40 to 60 age range. But I love the diversity. And we are all growing, learning, and building what I call brave relationships with each other. So I offer educational content and coaching. So I create modules. We have weekly coaching calls and or community building calls where we just are sharing real life together. It doesn't have to always be about the work, you know, like so, you know, things that I would regularly bring into the work would be, you know, building resilience, emotional literacy skills, learning how to practice self-compassion. You know, what does it mean to befriend yourself, and why does it matter, and what do we actually want, and how do we walk it out? And so yeah, there's an educational component, a community building component, and yeah, that's kind of it. So we run a year, we have rest time. So for me, sustainable work is really important for my mind body health, and so we work a certain number of weeks on, and then we rest, and we take some weeks on and we rest. And I just kind of try to build a very, like, again, I walk my talk and I need breathing room in my life to survive. So I build it into this community as well.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
Yeah, I think that's amazing that you kind of have that foresight, and that works for you, but I would think it also works for the members, because we all kind of need those rest times, I think,
I think
in
so.
order for it to be sustainable.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your sharing, for your vulnerability.
Your wisdom.
Your wisdom. Yeah. There's so many like amazing nuggets that just I personally took from this conversation, and I really appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you so much.
It's nice to meet you both.
It was really
Yes,
great
you
to
as
meet
well.
you too, Krista. Thank you so much.